Welcome to episode 22 of the 24-Hour Hustle Show, and today we got special guest Allyce Pichback, and she is the founder of Pinchback Consulting. Welcome to the 24-Hour Hustle Show. I'm your host, Anthony Freeze, and today we got special guest, Allyce. And I've been following a lot of your work on social media and all the things that you do, so I'm definitely looking forward to, your story and all the work that you've been doing with your consulting business and, everything that you got going on. So I definitely appreciate you being able to be on the show. So welcome.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me on your show. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Just so I can give some people some context, so I've been following you on Facebook for some time, and another person that was actually on the show, which was Brian Burley, who actually wrote Young Black Pittsburgh, you actually featured in that book. And for people who haven't read that book, there's a lot of great, accomplished black men and women in there. And when I came across your story, I just thought to myself, number one, this is a great story. And number two, I thought to myself, I got to get this person on the show. So whenever we got a chance to get together for coffee and I got a chance to hear a little bit of your story a lot more, I just thought to myself, what you're going to share is definitely going to be able to impact a lot of folks that can inspire them to also pursue a lot of their goals and dreams. So definitely looking forward to the conversation that we'll be able to have today. So for people who don't know who you are, why don't you give us your background and what it is exactly that you do?
Sure. So I'm a Pittsburgh native, so born and raised here. I actually grew up in the Knoxville neighborhood, now part of what they call the Hilltop communities. And I'm a graduate of Pittsburgh Public Schools, so of course from the best, Pittsburgh Public School, Shanley High School.
Whoop, whoop, Shanley alumni.
Absolutely. It was so good it had to go extinct.
Yeah.
And went on to the University of Pittsburgh and studied psychology and Japanese. So quick story about Japanese. I'm sure, how does black woman start studying Japanese? So when I went to Frick, I was in the International Studies Magnet, and if you didn't take a language in elementary school, you had to take Japanese. So I fell in love with it, had an excellent teacher, and decided to continue to pursue it. So when I went on to Shinley, I was also in the International Studies program and then went into the International Baccalaureate, the IB program. And actually, my 11th grade history teacher, Mr. Moser, nominated me for a global travel scholarship. And what that was an opportunity to travel abroad for 3 to 5 weeks over the summer. So naturally, I was like, hey, I've been studying Japanese at this point for 6 years. I'd love to go to Japan. So applied for the program, hey, maybe a long shot, but we'll see what happens. Next thing I know, I get an interview, and literally I went home and took a nap and got a phone call hey, we're sending you to Japan. So was really awesome experience. I was there for 4 weeks. I stayed with a host family, had a really, really great experience. So I came back, graduated from Shinley, went on to Pitt, continued with my Japanese studies. And my junior year, I spent a semester at Kansai Gaidai University in Osaka. So I was there for a semester, had a great time. It was an interesting experience. As you can imagine, being a black person in Japan, you do stick out. Japan is still very much a homogenous society, but I would say one of the most fascinating places in the world to visit. So put it on your bucket list. If you're going to start traveling, definitely check out Japan. So when I graduated from Pitt, the World Affairs Council, who had given me the scholarship for the Global Travel Scholarship Program, they actually came knocking and said, hey, we got a grant from the Heinz Endowments, and we want to increase the number of black male students who have the opportunity to travel abroad. And so they hired me as a program manager, and I went in and I coordinated the program. So when I got there, the program was in its 6th year, and they had only sent 2 black male students, during those 6 years. They sent a lot of black women, so I was in the first class of women they sent, and every year there tended to be 2 or 3 black women, but no black men. And so by the time I left in 2012, we had sent 20 students that year, and of the 20 students, 7 were black male students. So was very proud of that accomplishment. I had worked really hard to build some relationships with community organizations and mentoring programs, because the way that students were nominated were through their schools. And, sad to say that when when teachers are asked to nominate students, unfortunately, black male students don't necessarily rise to the top for a lot of different reasons. So we said we need to go to places where black male students are valued and where they're affirmed, and ask those people to nominate them, because we know that they exist and we know that they are more than capable and deserving of this experience. And I will say, not even, from my own bias, and, that year, the black male student cohort that we sent was among, some of the top students, out of the entire 20. So I stayed at the World Affairs Council for 3 years, and then I transitioned to Pittsburgh Public Schools, where I spent 5 years in the professional development department. So when I first got there, I was a project manager, so my job was to connect professional development opportunities to our evaluation system. So the district was in the middle of a grant from the Gates Foundation, about a $40 million grant, and then also another $40 million so from other funding sources to revamp what we call our human capital system. So a lot around teacher evaluation, some data collection, technology. And so what I was supposed to be doing was connecting professional development opportunities to the teacher evaluation system. What that turned into was project management for a lot of different projects that we were also working on. So I project managed our student perception surveys, which were an opportunity for students to give feedback about their experiences in class, and then part of that data was used in teacher evaluation. I also worked with a really awesome group of teacher leaders who wanted to lead their own professional development. So they actually got a grant directly from the Gates Foundation, first in the country, to do what they called an Elevating and Celebrating Effective Teaching and Teachers Conference. So the Gates Foundation was bringing these teachers together from across the country in different districts, but the teachers in Pittsburgh got a grant to do their own for Pittsburgh teachers in the region. So my job was basically to be the district liaison. So how can I help you get what you need to get? How can I remove some of the red tape of central office to make you successful? So I project managed that program for a while. Then I was promoted to Director of Professional Development about 2.5 years into that. And during that time, it was really about managing the entire the professional learning system for our teachers and school leaders. So, what is your job? What support do you need? How do you get it? What staff developers, what are they providing, and how do you have access to it? So it was a lot of coordination, and sometimes, honestly, it felt like herding cats, but in a lot of ways, it did connect teachers to, the things that they needed in terms of their professional learning needs. So during the time I was there, we had an administration change, and so we had a new superintendent, and there was a lot of restructuring. So they restructured the professional development department, and my role was cut. And so I was laid off from the district. So I'm like, okay, what do I do with my life? So I decided to go back to school. So I'm currently a master's student at Carnegie Mellon University, getting a master's in public management. And I decided to start a consulting business. And the reason that I did that was really because I had gained a lot of skills through the district and also through some nonprofit boards and other organizations that I've been a part of. And so people were coming to me and saying, hey, we know that you have these facilitation skills. We know that you're good at, really assessing organizational culture. We know that you're good at strategic planning. Would you come and help us out? And I said, well, if people are asking me this, on a regular basis, maybe I can figure out a way to monetize that. So in August of last year, I went and got an LLC and decided to kind of put my name out there. And so far, it's been a great experience. So I'm working with about 4 clients right now, and each project is a little bit different, but it's fun, it's intellectually stimulating, and I'm excited to be able to really help organizations get smarter and better about their work.
Absolutely. And one of the great things, aside from also going to school, you actually do this full time and been doing pretty well with it since starting it up last year.
Yeah, I've been very fortunate. And so, in terms of promotion and branding, I think a lot of that has really been through word of mouth. And I attribute that just to, people who really have, mentored me and who have believed in me. And when opportunities come up, I'm what I like to say in their top 3. So they say, hey, there's this opportunity. And they say, well, call Allyce. She would be able to, really help or support you around this. So I've had, been really fortunate to just really have people come my way. And, opportunities have just, happened as a result of that.
So you bring up a great point as far as people that have mentored you, people that have influenced you. Talk about a little bit some of the things that you went through growing up, and as far as some of the people that inspired you, some of the people that influenced you, that helped you develop your mindset to get to the point that you are today.
Absolutely. So I would absolutely start with my family. So I come from, a very, powerful and dynamic family. So I'll start with my grandparents. So my dad's parents were civil rights activists, and my grandmother actually spent 8 days in jail during the civil rights movement, fighting and protesting segregation. My granddad was also very involved with getting Martin Luther King Day recognized as a national holiday. He also participated in sit-ins. So, my dad is from Danville, Virginia, and that's where my grandparents lived as well. So we're talking about, the southern part of Virginia, and one of the last Confederate capitals, of this country. And, to this day, they still have Confederate marches on Main Street every Saturday. So, they were the same things they were fighting for about 50 years ago, we're still fighting for now. But absolutely inspired by them and motivated to, do the work that I do. I'd also say, my parents, who've always just been open and allowed me to kind of be myself, when they said, hey, we're going to put our child on a plane to Japan, they were like, cool, we're excited about it. And then, actually came back and served as a resource to the parents that I worked with when I was at the World Affairs Council and encouraged them to, send their students abroad as well. I'd say professionally, even, during my time, with the World Affairs Council, I had a mentor named David Murdoch. He was a lawyer at K&L Gates. He's since passed away, but absolutely believed in me, made many connections for me professionally, wrote a lot of recommendation letters for me, and was very instrumental in, a lot of my success in my early adulthood. And then, I also have a group of wonderful women. We call ourselves the Formation Circle, and they absolutely inspire, motivate. It's just wonderful to be around Black women who understand you, who get you, who don't make you feel like when you talk about certain things you experience that you're in the twilight zone, and then also make connections. I'd say probably 75 to 80% of the connections that I've made with my consulting business, with other personal and professional opportunities, have been from this network of women as well.
Awesome. So whenever you got to the point when you did start up your consulting business and get your LLC together, what was it like in the feeling like before you actually got it started? Because one of the things you said, you got let go from your job. I know how that feels and things like that. But, for people that, are working in a job and they want to start up a side hustle and they're trying to maybe eventually get to the point of starting their own business and actually doing it full time, what was it like for you in your experience in, the initial stages of actually getting that started up? What were some of the initial challenges you say you faced?
I would say that I was really nervous. So, when I got laid off, and I did have about 3 months notice. And so, I started thinking about, well, do I want to find another job? If I do, what would it be? And, I really didn't see anything that was really, exciting to me or really motivated me to want to do it on a regular basis. And so I said, well, let me just kind of explore what it's going to take to go on my own. Now, I will say, I did have the benefit of, collecting unemployment for several months, which was helpful and kind of helped to keep my lights on and keep my bills paid. I said, but at the same time, it wasn't something that would, help me to maintain a lifestyle I had become used to. And, I also didn't want to just, sit around and not do something, with those skills. So, for, people who are looking to kind of branch out and start that side hustle, I'd absolutely recommend do it while you have a steady income and, put aside as much as you can, to be able to maintain. But for me, I kind of took a leap of faith and said, look, I'm going to try to make this work. And, and if it dries up one day, I think I would have the skill set to go back into, a regular full-time job. But, what I think I'm learning about myself is that, I operate better outside of some systems. And I actually appreciate the opportunity to kind of bounce around. I am not a very stagnant person. I find myself involved in a lot of things all the time. So, working with, different clients and literally on my calendar for a day being like, I'm going to meet with this person for 2 hours and I'm going to leave here and go here. It actually motivates me and makes me excited to kind of get up and do the work every day.
Awesome. So tell us what your consulting business is and all the things that you do and all the services that you provide in that.
Yeah, so my consulting business is really around strategic planning, staff development, organizational management. So going into organizations, helping them to think about, how do they get smarter and better about their work to better serve the people who, they have, their mission says that they serve. So whether that is understanding the culture of an organization or providing professional development opportunities for their staff members, or doing some program evaluation and thinking about what's working and what needs to be tweaked, and what maybe needs to be discontinued. So those are a lot of things that I focused on. So every client is a little bit different, and part of what I do is really go in and just talk to them and then listen and say, what is it that you're trying to do? What is your problem of practice? And, what's the current thing that's happening? What's the current state? And then where do you want to be at the end of our time together? And then what steps is it going to take? So, some cases that looks like, an overhaul of culture and really, thinking about how an organization that's spread across multiple sites, has one consistent brand and mutual accountability. And another one, it may look like taking an initiative of an organization and, going and developing a strategic plan for that, a 2 to 3 year plan, thinking about how all the different pieces fit together. And another one, it might be, looking at, an alliance of people with mutual interests and thinking about how they build their skills as a collective and then take those skills back into their respective organizations. So really just depends, but at the basis of it is really just helping people to develop themselves, develop their organizations, and really be able to enhance their work to better serve their constituents.
So for somebody that may be trying to start a consulting business and actually get into those different areas of helping nonprofits and organizations and things like that and help their structure and develop their culture, what are some advice or tips that you can maybe give somebody to, have their philosophy down, or maybe their process of, going in and helping, a potential client? What does that process look like for you whenever you're helping someone initially?
Well, I'd say even before I start to help them initially, in terms of getting there and even having the credibility for somebody to want to work with you, you have to be involved. So I spent a lot of time volunteering for organizations. I've sat on several boards, and, I've led actually, a board as well. So, there needs to be, they need to see that, you understand the work, that you've done the work, and that you have the experience to help them get better. And then even in those spaces where you've held these positions, as we like to say these days, you need to have receipts. So what did you do during that time? Did you help an organization to rebrand itself? Did you help an organization to develop a public policy agenda? What do you have in terms of tangible, deliverable outcomes that you can then, take into that? I think networking is important as well. And not networking like go get a whole bunch of business cards.
Right, we talked about that on the show a lot. That doesn't work.
No, not at all. But really, getting to know people, making meaningful connections, promoting other people, putting other people before you, and also, doing some work that, doesn't necessarily need to get recognized. There's a lot of times where, I'm always watching what's going on, and I like to just support people, not because I want to say like, oh, Allyce supported X, Y, and Z, but it's like, I believe in what you're doing. I believe in you. I'm just going to support you, and you don't have to put my name in the annual report. Just know that I'm watching, and I'm going to support you with my time or talent or, my treasure. And so I think that's a piece of it as well, is really showing people that you're committed to the work. So when you finally get there, I think a lot of it is about listening. So with all of the contracts that I take on, the first part I do is really about discovery. So I go and talk to people. I go to, meetings if I can. I go to events because I really want to understand the organization. I want to understand the people. I want to understand the culture. Feel it. Right. And, as my professor at CMU who teaches organizational management, he really talks about, walking around and kind of being present. Because it's difficult to try to change or transform a system when you don't allow yourself to be a part of it. So I really need to understand, an organization before I can come in and make recommendations about how to transform it. And, also just continuing to hone your skills. So, that's part of the reason that I went to graduate school. And, I delayed. And, if it was up to my mother and father, I would have went to graduate school right after I graduated from undergraduate. But I said, before I spend money and time on something, I want to make sure that it's transferable. And right now, I feel that in this program, I'm literally building my toolkit as, an organizational consultant. And literally, every class that I take, I'm learning more about my skill and honing my craft.
So whenever you're helping, different clients, what are some of the common problems that you're seeing in these organizations that you're looking to solve for them, like something that's happening across the board for almost everyone?
I think that, most of the organizations I work with, and right now they're all nonprofits, they want to do good work, and they absolutely do good work. But they're doing good work on systems that are huge and in a lot of ways feel insurmountable. So, a lot of them, serve, black children or children experiencing poverty, and racism and poverty are very large issues. So trying to permeate systems that have been stacked against, those who are disenfranchised by it for, centuries and generations is very difficult. So how do you kind of, hone in on your piece of the world and figure out, what you're going to do and the action steps? Also, I think, really just being able to capture best practices. So a lot of times in nonprofits, there's not a lot of money. That's why they're nonprofits. Mm-hmm. And so, having people who are able to document and really, capture what's working doesn't necessarily happen because you're wearing 25 or 30 other hats. So who has time to kind of do the paperwork when, you kind of feel like in a lot of ways you're putting out the fires. So there's a lot of not writing down things, and then there's a lot of turnover. And then literally there's, I think one of the Achilles heels of nonprofits, and, I'd also say, in some, cases, the education system is that when one person leaves, that program, that initiative goes with them. And then, unfortunately, it hurts the people that it was intended to serve. So I think that, that's a major issue as well. I think just really, getting clear about the mission and really ensuring that everyone is aligned. I think that it's hard sometimes for people to buy into it, especially when there's a lot of turnover. And I know even in Pittsburgh Public Schools, I was the third director of professional development. We had 2 superintendents. We had several deputy superintendents. So on the academic side of the house, there was a lot of churn. And so people get initiative fatigue. They're like, look, they're going to come in, they're going to be here for 2 years, so why am I going to change my whole practice and everything I'm doing knowing that they're going to be gone? And so literally we kind of call that the pendulum in education that literally swings back and forth. And, people are just like, look, I'm just going to, stay stagnant. Even if, the leader that comes in, has a good vision, they're less likely to buy into it because they just feel like, it's, you'll get kind of excited about one thing and it'll be gone. So, those are some of the challenges I think that, the organizations really face. And so, what I try to come in is really and do is kind of, let's chip away at some of those things. Let's think about them a little bit more strategically. And then also, I think the good thing about being a consultant is that you can bring an outside perspective. And, really say, I don't necessarily speak the language of this organization. I'm not in it every day. But from an outside perspective, here are some questions that I have. And, that's also a difficult place to be because I think also, especially in, education and in nonprofit work, people get very personally attached to the work. And so I think it's important to try to make that distinction that when I come in and ask these questions, I'm questioning process. I'm questioning, systems. I'm not necessarily questioning you as a person. I'm not saying, that you are ineffective as a person. I'm really trying to understand the process by which you do your work and the system, in which you do it. And let's, keep the conversation there.
Absolutely. So, you say that, what would you, like for anybody that is looking to do consulting and also maybe get into this line of work and facing those different problems and challenges, what is maybe a frustrating point for you as far as like maybe trying to solve these problems, and how can and what are you doing to overcome some of those?
So I think a piece of it is that when you kind of are working on an initiative or you're trying to do transformation, really getting buy-in. So leaders may be very bought into the work and excited about it, but sometimes, depending, how big the organization is, the people who actually have to carry out the work on the ground are not really impacted by it, or they don't buy into the work. So, making those connections, for them, I think is very important. And I think about that, from the context of the school district. So school district has a new strategic plan, it sounds very exciting, has a lot of great words in it. But what does that mean for the teacher in the classroom every day who literally has, 30 some kids in front of them, and each kid comes in with their own set of issues? So while these things may sound very great and aspirational, what are the implications for students? And that applies, I think, also to some of the other organizations that I work with as well, is really thinking about what the organizational buy-in looks like as well. How are you bringing everybody along this journey to really get the work done? I think ways to really deal with it or to mitigate some of that is in the conversations, like, are you just talking to leadership, or are you talking to people who are at the ground level. So when I go in, I say, look, I absolutely want to talk to as many people on your leadership team as possible, but then I want to talk to people who are 1 level down, 2 levels down, 3 levels down, the people who really are, in the trenches. I want to talk to them. I want to understand how they're interacted with. So how often do they interact with their immediate supervisor? Is the immediate supervisor at the management level? Are they 5 levels down? How is the information being translated to them? And then what gets lost in translation, versus, what's said at one level and, what happens at a different level. So, really thinking about how we make some of those connections is very important to, really ensure that, transformation is happening across the organization.
So what's something inspirational that you would say to somebody that's maybe trying to get into this line of work? It's something that they're passionate about. They want to help organizations. They want to get the better processes in place. What are some inspirational things or strategies or good tips that you felt like you've learned along the way and felt like, oh, this one thing really helped a lot that maybe you can share with somebody else and that would help them as well?
So first of all, I would say do it. I think there are a lot of smart people with a lot of great ideas, but they're afraid to leave their comfort zones and status quo. And I know that even from experience. I have a lot of good friends and former colleagues who, have worked for organizations that are just like, look, but I can't give up this salary. I don't want to give up these benefits. I don't know if I'll be able to make it on my own. So the first thing I would say, do it. Take that leap of faith and say, I'm going to, try it. And if I fail, that's okay. Brush myself off. I can try again. And, I also can, think about, what are some, other, more stable opportunities as I'm trying to refine my process. I'd also say, continue to stay involved in different organizations, continue to build your credibility through volunteerism and mentorship. That's really been important to me. So, I try to, do as much as I can, just for people and not, monetize everything. Some things I just do in kind, and part of that is because I feel like anyone who's been blessed with anything has an obligation to give back. But I also think that really helps to build, your brand and your credibility as well. I'd also say, from a practical, you have to eat every day standpoint, if you do have a full-time job, start setting money aside. Think about, your 3-month, your 6-month plan, so that if and when you decide to make this a full-time gig, that you have a little cushion. Because, it's very different working for yourself and going back and forth with people with contracts and, trying to figure out, how their board is governed, how their finances work. And, you may not get, you may do work that week and maybe you don't get paid in 2 weeks for that work. Maybe it's 2 months. Maybe you go back and forth in negotiations for 3-4 months with the organization before you actually get something off the ground. So, make sure if you can that you have that nest egg. And maybe even think about, do you have the ability to take on a small project where, you say, I'm still working full time, but, part-time, maybe 3 or 4 hours a week, I can commit to something small. And, that money could just be put aside and say, this is my consulting money that I'll use to, continue to start to build up my business while I'm still working full time. Because at the end of the day, you do have to, think about your livelihood.
Yeah. Absolutely. So one of the things that we can actually want to get a little bit more deeper detail on is talking about contracts and things like that. How is that working in your world of business as far as like how long it is, what's the entail as far as putting these contracts together with clients, just so, we understand as far as in your world and how that can maybe even apply to other businesses as well.
Absolutely. So I think a piece of it is really understanding the client's needs. So sitting down with them and talking about, what exactly is it that you want me to do? And then being very realistic about, how much time they have and how much time you have. And then also thinking about, money and what is it going to take for you to be able to make that amount of money? Will it cover your expenses? Will you be able to still maintain? And then also thinking about your client base. So as I mentioned, I work with nonprofits, so I'm not out here getting $1 million contracts yet, but so that's also something to think about. So thinking about what is it that they have in terms of a budget? What are the specific things that they want you to work on? How much time is it going to take? And what does that mean for your own, livelihood and, maintenance of your lifestyle during that time? And then the way that I break my contracts down is, really through work streams. So I say, okay, based on the conversation we've had, it seems like there are 4 discrete work streams that we've identified. So here's the overarching goal of this work stream. And then here are the sub goals. And then these sub goals, I set, a timeline to them. And then based on that, I set a rate. So, I have an hourly rate that I set. And then I also, think sometimes about, a specific, project rate as well, which in a lot of ways still boils down to the hourly rate, because what I would say is like, okay, this specific project is going to take me 35 hours. So, that's the way that I break down my contracts. And then also just thinking about, capacity. So, as I said, I'm working with, 4 different organizations right now. So what does that mean in terms of time? So, if I'm here, then what does it mean for travel time to get across town to this person? What does it mean for, some of the other things I'm involved in? What does it mean for my personal time? And I think that's another thing that, when you go out on your own, you have to be mindful of. How much of your personal time are you sacrificing? And I think on the end of, making sure that you maintain, healthy relationships, but at the same time, knowing that literally when you work for yourself, every, time is money and every hour does count. And so you also have to be mindful of how you're spending your time as well. And thinking about, that line between, when folks want to hit you up for advice or information, is this like, hey, like I can talk to you about this out of kindness of my heart, or do we need to sit down and have a conversation about a proposal? Because, frankly, when you're working for yourself, you may not have as much time to give of yourself freely. So really, making that distinction between, which of those things kind of still live in that volunteerism, pro bono piece, and which things you say, look, this is what I do for a living, and, we need to think about, a way for me to, support you, but, there would be a cost attached to it.
Yeah, I think that's another challenge that I know some people may face as far as trying to come up with pricing and finding out how valuable their time is and pricing it accordingly. Because when you are at the point where you are doing it full time, you got to think about those things, because this is your livelihood. At that point, that's your baby, and you got to take care of it. And finances need to be coming through for that to be able to take care of yourself. So, let's talk about, going into the future with everything. You're approaching actually your first year coming up pretty soon. I'm pretty sure you're going to do some celebrating with that.
Like to.
So what are some of the big goals that you see for your consulting business, 2 years from now, 5 years from now, and going into the future?
So I would say, just continuing to build clientele. And I think, with having some of these first clients, really having, proof of concept that, I do have the skills and abilities. And I know that, they absolutely trust in me now. Otherwise, they wouldn't have signed a contract. But having, very tangible projects that I can point to and say, these are things that I accomplished and did, as a consultant. I'd say, within that 3 to 5 year range, like I'd love to be running, a $250,000 business. I'd love to be able to bring on staff and, have people who, help to do this work and really build, my own consulting firm versus just being, one person. I think that, thinking about, is my skill set beyond just Pittsburgh? What, are there clients, beyond this city that I would work with? Would I travel? Do I want to develop some, very specific modules or online, webinars or tools that, people could use that kind of give them some of this information and advice? Do I want to start, something where people subscribe to it? So I think that, the possibilities are limitless as it relates to the work that I'm doing, with this, but also on the education and, the next couple of years, finishing up my master's degree. And, I'd like to, go on to the next level and also get a doctorate. So, because for me, especially, with the professional development background, my belief is that you do have to be a lifelong learner, that you should continue to hone your skills and that, I should continue to fill my toolkit. So absolutely continue to think about my own personal and professional education in the next 3 to 5 years as well.
Any specific strategies you have in mind that you want to implement as far as obtaining some of those goals, as far as maybe getting your team and having a bigger staff and doing the webinars and things like that?
I'd love to, in terms of building my team, thinking about people who have these skill sets, have been in organizations where, they've done this work, they've gotten the skills, they've been developed, but say, hey, look, I think I could do this myself. And, I absolutely believe that they can. And, looking at those type of people who are ready to kind of step out and do something different. I think they would make great assets to the team. I'm excited also, from my own, personal perspective to see where, my education will take me. So I'm very excited about the program I'm in, very excited about all the learning that I'm getting around organizational management and culture and running organizations. And I think that would be, come in handy when I think about, trying to expand my business to be, something that I have employees. So, I'm excited about those skills. The doctorate piece, not quite sure, what I would focus on, if I want to kind of stay in like the organizational management piece, or maybe I want to go in a completely different direction. I think that's a little bit TBD. But absolutely, thinking about my, these translation of skills, and then also how I can help people to kind of take that leap from, some of the organizations and systems that, they're employed by into, this kind of work on your own and really, starting your own business.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So, with as we get closer to wrapping up, what's like some of the legacy that you would say that you're looking to leave behind? What's like the big goal or like the big purpose that you would say like that you try to get across to maybe anybody you come encounter with or to your clients that you work with?
So I would say in terms of my legacy, I want people to know that I always stand up for what's right. And whether or not that means standing with a group of people or whether that means standing alone, you will find me standing up for what's right. Because I've learned that you'll actually lose more sleep, maintaining the status quo when you know it's wrong than you will standing up for what's right. So, that's a big piece of it. That I encourage people to get smarter and better about their work, because when you, when you decide as an organization that you're going to support a certain group, especially a group that, has been historically and currently disenfranchised, you have an obligation to continue to learn and continue to grow, because the people that you serve deserve that. So, that's something that I try to model, for, the people that I work with. I also want them to just, continue to be very thoughtful about work. And, especially when it comes to organizations that, do service work to address a need, I'd like to, actually encourage them to think about, how are you going to sunset on your organization? So in 15 years, should you still be trying to address the same issue, or should we be sunsetting because you've worked to solve the problem? And, frankly, when we think about some of these, nonprofits or social service organizations, you should really be thinking about how to put yourself out of business and out of a job because we've solved some of the problems, and not just to continue to, churn our wheels on them. So really helping people to be innovative and thoughtful, and not being afraid to say, look, no, I don't have this job anymore because we've solved this problem. But guess what? The world is full of multiple problems. So now we have some other ones we can move on to and solve as well.
And anything specific that we may not have touched on, or something that maybe, deeper in your heart that you feel like you may want to share, or feel like you want to encourage, or anything like that at all? Because like right now, the floor is kind of yours to kind of share or promote anything that you may want to at all.
Yeah, so I would say, mentoring is very important to me. So if you have the opportunity to give back and to instill in a young person what you've learned, good, bad, or indifferent, I definitely encourage, you to do that. Continue to sharpen your skills, take advantage of the resources that are there, go out and meet people. There are a lot of, free professional development opportunities. There are also some that, are not free, but, put it in your budget to want to learn and get better about it. And then just be aware of, what's going on, in this city, in this region, in this world. Stay abreast of that and understand the power that you have as an individual to change those things.
That's awesome. That's good. That's good stuff. And I like how you went directed to the camera, like I'm talking to you right now. I like that. So, where's the best? So, since you was talking to them, where's the best place they can get in contact with you?
Absolutely. So, best place to get in contact. You can start on my website, pinchbackconsulting.com. I'm also on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, at Allyce Pichback. So you can also, hit me up on any of those as well. And then I'm sure that, if you see me in the streets, like just come up and say, hey, I saw you on 24 Hour Hustle. I'd love to talk to you. As you can tell, I love to talk too. So, I'm happy to sit down, have a cup of coffee, and still, what I've learned into other folks. I have no problem sharing. I know some people kind of get a little territorial about, what they know. But to me, really, I think the more that everyone knows, the better we all can be.
Absolutely. And just in wrapping up, one of the great things that we're doing to wrap up shows is we're doing a 24-hour challenge.
Oh, okay.
So if there is anything that you would propose to anybody that is watching this episode that, may have felt motivated or inspired by something or, moved to actually do something, what's a challenge that you can put out there to get them inspired to actually take action on it and be able to do it within the next 24 hours?
So in the next 24 hours, I'd say a couple things. Number one, if you want to start that business wherever you are, whether it's in Pennsylvania or wherever else, look up how to start an LLC in your state. So, get that information. It's not hard. It's as simple as a Google search. That's where I started. How to start an LLC in Pennsylvania. It'll take you to multiple websites. You can read through them. It gives you the nitty gritty. You can probably do it on your own, or you can, enlist the services of people who've done it before in different organizations. So definitely do that. I say from a personal perspective, I'm vegan, and that's kind of tangential, but I think about just my own health and well-being, and how I have the energy to get around and do all the things that I do and move and shake and keep myself healthy and well. So don't eat meat or dairy for 24 hours. I'm sure you'll feel better. Maybe that'll motivate you to want to do those things too. And also think about how you can, give back to a young person. So whether it's somebody that a family member, someone in your neighborhood, like within the next 24 hours, like call them up on the phone, send them, well, I don't know if kids talk on the phone anymore, but like hit them up on like Snapchat or something, right. Or just let them know that you're watching them, you're encouraging them, and that, you're here to answer questions and help them to navigate this world too.
That's awesome. Those are 3 good points. So, definitely look up an LLC in the next 24 hours. Let us know how that process goes for you. Try the vegan thing for 24 hours. I know for me that'd be a challenge because I'm a meat eater, but I could maybe do it for 24 hours. I think I could. I mean, I could do that for one day. And then, who would you add value to? At least one person in the next 24 hours. Let us know how that goes for you. Definitely comment down below and let us know how that goes for you, because we want to get people in the action mode of doing. And we don't just want all this information to just sit there, you be inspired and motivated, and then you're not doing anything with it. So I love this concept. So use the hashtag 24-hour challenge. So I definitely appreciate you for coming on to the show.
Thank you for having me.
I know you're definitely going to do a lot of great things. I know in the future, I'm definitely looking forward to how things go. I'm looking forward to the anniversary date coming up. That'll be a huge accomplishment. So we definitely will be watching and seeing how everything goes.
Right,
so now that we know what Allyce does with her 24 hours, I want to know what you do with your 24 hours. Definitely comment down below, whether you're watching on Facebook or on YouTube. Turn on notifications. Make sure you subscribe, and we will see you on the next episode.